When we talk about a super empath, we're not just talking about someone who feels deeply or senses the emotions of others. We're talking about someone who has learned, often through trial and heartbreak, to regulate their own emotional landscape in a way that becomes almost impenetrable. You see, narcissists feed on reaction. They thrive on it. They need to see the flicker of anger, the tear, the trembling frustration, the self-doubt, all of it. Every reaction is fuel for their power. Every emotional flare-up a tiny victory in a game they've spent years perfecting. And yet the super empath learns a simple truth. What the narcissist wants most, the empath can refuse to give. At first, it may not be obvious for many empaths. The instinct is to respond, to engage, to reason, to explain. We are wired for connection. Our nervous system senses threat and injustice like radar. When the narcissist throws out their bait, a sly comment, a passive-aggressive remark, a subtle insult, the instinct is to respond. And each response, even if it's quiet, is exactly what the narcissist is waiting for. But a super empath, through relentless self-awareness and inner work, begins to interrupt that instinct. They pause, they breathe, they remind themselves that reaction is optional. That calm is not passivity. That silence is not weakness. The first time this happens is revolutionary. The narcissist will test boundaries endlessly, pushing, prodding, seeking a crack in the armor. They will escalate, manipulate, attempt to provoke. And the super empath, armed with mindfulness, with presence, with patience, simply does not react. This refusal to react is not about suppressing emotion or denying oneself. It's about cultivating a centered awareness that notices the stimulus but does not surrender to it. This is emotional sovereignty. And when the narcissist encounters this, something remarkable happens. Confusion, frustration, even fear. They are faced with a person who is no longer playing their game. What the super empath understands is that reaction is a kind of currency. Every display of upset, every defensive argument, every hurt sigh is traded for the illusion of control. A narcissist measures power not by love, not by mutual respect, but by influence over another's inner world. They measure it in tension, in anxiety, in the subtle shifts of the other's energy. So when the super empath stops providing this currency, the narcissist is effectively bankrupt. No amount of charm, no amount of manipulation, no carefully constructed story can penetrate a mind that has learned the art of equanimity. And here's the nuance. Stopping reaction is not instantaneous. It is cultivated over time. It begins with awareness, with noticing that a feeling of provocation has arisen. It continues with deliberate breathing, grounding, and sometimes stepping away. It grows with self-compassion, with the recognition that emotional autonomy is a right, not a privilege. Slowly, the empath rewires their nervous system. They learn that anger, fear, anxiety, or hurt do not have to dictate behavior. They can acknowledge the feeling, let it exist, and then choose a response that aligns with their integrity, not with the narcissist's agenda. There is also a subtle but profound element of pleasure in this. Not the kind of petty satisfaction that fuels bitterness, but the quiet, almost sacred joy of reclaiming power that was once surrendered. Every moment of non-reaction is a moment of liberation. Every calm pause is a declaration. You do not control me. You never did. And it is here, in this quiet mastery, that the super empath exerts the most profound influence. The narcissist, accustomed to a constant emotional harvest, now finds the empath like a desert, dry, unyielding, unresponsive to old patterns. The imbalance, once so favorable to the narcissist, begins to tilt. This practice also has deep health implications. Chronic engagement with a narcissist with constant emotional spikes triggers a stress response in the body that is exhausting, corrosive, and harmful. Cortisol surges, sleep suffers, digestion falters, and the immune system weakens. By refusing to react, the super empath protects not only their mind but also their body. They reclaim the natural rhythms of their nervous system. Heart rate stabilizes, breathing slows, energy returns, emotional regulation is in fact a form of self-healing. Each pause, each refusal to feed drama, strengthens resilience and restores vitality. And perhaps most importantly, this is a practice that ripples outward. Once a super empath stops reacting, their interactions with others shift too. They model a different kind of presence, a grounded calm that can transform relationships. People are drawn not by manipulation but by authenticity, not by provocation but by integrity. It is a profound lesson for everyone in their orbit. Control is not about forcing others to bend. It is about mastering the self. The challenge is not in theory, it is in practice. The narcissist will escalate. They will throw more, try harder, intensify the storm. And yet the super empath stands like a tree in a gale, rooted, flexible, and unshaken. This is a different kind of courage than physical bravery. It is the courage of the mind, the heart, and the soul united. It is the courage to know that peace is stronger than rage, that presence is stronger than manipulation, that awareness is stronger than manipulation, that awareness is stronger than deceit. In the end, the super empath's refusal to react is not an act of cruelty, nor is it a tactic aimed at punishment. It is the ultimate act of self-respect and integrity. It communicates without words that their emotional life belongs to no one else. It dismantles the narcissist's illusions, piece by piece, and in this quiet yet profound way, the empath becomes a force that the narcissist cannot touch. So remember this. The next time someone tries to bait you, to manipulate your feelings, to test your boundaries, pause, breathe, notice the urge to react, and then choose calm. This simple act is revolutionary. It is transformative, and it is the first, most powerful step toward reclaiming your life, your health, and your soul. Because true strength is not in the fight, but in the unshakable stillness that leaves the manipulator powerless. And that stillness, that inner quiet, is nothing short of liberation. Boundaries are something we often underestimate until we've had them violated, tested, or ignored. For most people, boundaries are an abstract concept, a polite line we hope others won't cross. But for a super empath, boundaries become sacred. They are not a suggestion. They are not flexible in the way a narcissist expects. They are firm, clear, and non-negotiable, and they form the foundation of every interaction, every decision, every moment of self-preservation. The reason this is so revolutionary in dealing with a narcissist is that a narcissist thrives on fluidity, confusion, and exploitation. They test limits relentlessly because ambiguity is their playground. But when a super empath enforces boundaries without guilt or hesitation, the playground disappears. At the beginning, setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable. Many empaths are conditioned to overgive, to over-explain, to anticipate the needs of others at the expense of their own. It's not malicious, it's compassionate. But in relationships with narcissists, this tendency is exploited. Every overgiven favor, every unspoken compromise, every quiet acceptance of mistreatment becomes a lever of control. The narcissist measures power by the elasticity of your boundaries, by how far you will bend before snapping. So the first step toward liberation is recognizing that boundaries are not barriers to love, but to abuse. They are not walls to shut others out, but lines that declare, this is where I begin, and this is where I end. And this is where I end. The super empath learns to distinguish between kindness and weakness. They understand that saying no, walking away, or refusing to engage in manipulation is not cruelty. It is self-respect. And this understanding transforms every encounter. When a narcissist attempts to guilt, pressure, or manipulate, they encounter a new kind of presence, one that is unflinching. The super empath does not flinch. They do not negotiate their value. They do not apologize for their limits, and this lack of pliability disrupts the narcissist's sense of control. For someone who thrives on bending others to their will, encountering resistance that is calm, steady, and unwavering is profoundly disorienting. But establishing unbreakable boundaries is not just about saying no. It is about clarity and consistency. A boundary must be communicated clearly and enforced consistently. If the super empath says, "I will not tolerate disrespectful language," then every time it occurs, the same consequence must follow: leaving the conversation, disengaging, or walking away. Inconsistency invites the narcissist back into the game, and even a small crack can be exploited. Consistency teaches the narcissist that the empath is not a moving target, not a source of malleable validation, not a plaything for emotional games. This consistency, over time, builds an invisible but impenetrable wall around the empath's inner life. There is also a profound psychological effect on the empath themselves. Boundaries are not only protective against external harm, they are restorative internally. They teach the body and mind that your needs, your energy, and your emotional safety are as important as anyone else's. This sense of worth, this reinforcement of self-respect, strengthens resilience, reduces stress, and restores equilibrium to a nervous system that may have been on constant high alert. By setting boundaries, the super empath recalibrates the body's stress response, allowing healing, focus, and emotional stability. Over time, this is not just defense, it is growth. It is a reclamation of the emotional and physical space that the narcissist once occupied. The process of boundary setting also involves a profound level of self-awareness. The super empath must understand what triggers them, what is non-negotiable, and what is negotiable, and what is negotiable. This requires honesty, reflection, and sometimes painful acknowledgement of past patterns. Narcissists are skilled at identifying weak points, so the empath must become acutely aware of their own vulnerabilities, their own history of codependency, and the old habits that used to invite manipulation. Only with this self-awareness can boundaries be truly effective. Only then can the empath enforce them without hesitation or regret. Interestingly, the effect of unbreakable boundaries extends far beyond the narcissist. It sends a message to the world: you are worthy of respect. It teaches by example, not by confrontation. Others see that the empath values themselves, and they are more likely to treat them with corresponding care. Boundaries, therefore, are not isolationist. They are a form of communication. They say, "I am here. I am whole. I will not sacrifice my integrity for your convenience." And when thus is modeled consistently, it transforms relationships, both toxic and healthy. The narcissist, meanwhile, experiences something deeply unsettling. They are used to fluidity, to bending reality, and manipulating perception. When they encounter an empath whose boundaries are unbreakable, they are confronted with a force they cannot move. No gaslighting, no charm, no calculated aggression works. The super empath becomes a mirror, reflecting back their manipulations without flinching, without guilt, without surrender. This reflection is disorienting, even frightening, because it exposes the narcissist's strategies for what they are: empty, futile, and powerless against a person who knows and protects themselves. Boundaries are also transformative because they teach detachment. By defining clearly what is acceptable and what is not, the empath learns to disengage without internalizing the narcissist's chaos. Emotional energy is no longer wasted on defending, explaining, or rescuing. Instead, energy is conserved, redirected, and invested in healing growth and meaningful connections. Detachment in this sense is not apathy. It is strategic preservation of one's own health and sanity. And finally, boundaries are liberating. For the first time, the empath may experience a relationship with themselves that is untainted by fear or obligation. They may finally hear their own voice over the clamor of manipulation. They may finally feel the weight lift from their shoulders as they realize, "I am responsible for myself, and no one else has the power to control my inner world without my consent." This is empowerment. This is strength. This is liberation. This is liberation. So when we speak of a super empath, we are speaking of someone who has learned the profound power of boundaries, not as a weapon, not as a tool of vengeance, but as a mechanism of self-preservation. health, and emotional sovereign, sulfuric. Naughty boundaries are not negotiable. They are the architecture of freedom. And when a narcissist meets such a person, they encounter something they have never experienced before. The simple, unshakable truth that control can no longer be taken, that respect cannot be demanded, and that the empath's life belongs entirely to them. A boundary is not just a line. It is a declaration, a shield, and a pathway to peace. And for the super empath, it is the first step in reclaiming. It is the first step in reclaiming life, health, and self-worth in a world that often seeks to erode it. Stand firm, protect your space, and know that your boundaries are your liberation. One of the most profound shifts a super empath undergoes is the ability to see through the mask. At first, it is subtle, a faint sense that something is not as it appears. Perhaps it is a tone of voice, a pause in conversation, or a pattern that repeats too perfectly to be genuine. Narcissists are masters of illusion. They craft personas designed to charm, manipulate, and control. They know precisely which buttons to press, which vulnerabilities to exploit, and which narratives will keep their targets compliant. For a long time, the empath, with all their compassion, may be drawn in by the carefully constructed performance. They may rationalize inconsistencies, overlook small manipulations, and hope for the better side to emerge. But the super empath evolves, and with evolution comes clarity. The ability to see through the mask is not simply a matter of intelligence or observation. It is a combination of intuition, emotional insight, and deep reflection. The super empath develops a radar for authenticity. They notice the dissonance between words and actions, between promises and reality. They detect the subtle manipulation hidden in compliments, the calculated charm disguised as kindness, and the emotional coercion buried beneath concern. Every every word, every interaction is analyzed through the lens of awareness. This is not paranoia. It is discernment. It is the ability to differentiate between genuine connection and performance designed to control. What makes this so powerful is that the narcissist relies entirely on deception. Their influence depends on keeping the empath guessing, off balance, and emotionally engaged. They count on the empath's compassion to override caution, their hope to blind them to inconsistency, and their desire for connection to ignore warning signs. When a super empath sees through the mask, the narcissist's toolkit begins to fail. Gaslighting, triangulation, blame shifting, all of it loses its effect because the empath no longer doubts their own perception. They no longer seek external validation to confirm what they sense internally. Awareness becomes a shield, and the mask no longer hides anything. This clarity also brings an essential emotional shift. Once the super empath sees through the mask, the feelings of confusion, self-blame, and guilt begin to dissolve. These emotions, which the narcissist relies upon to maintain control, are replaced by quiet understanding. This person is not capable of genuine reciprocity. They are not capable of empathy, respect, or authentic connection in the way the empath once believed. And this understanding is liberating. It allows the empath to step back without resentment or anger, not because they are giving up, but because they finally see the truth. The process of seeing through the mask also requires reflection on one's own patterns. A super empath recognizes that their empathy, their compassion, and their desire to help have sometimes been exploited. They examine past interactions, not with shame, but with curiosity and honesty, identifying where their boundaries were blurred, where their trust was manipulated, and where their emotional energy was drained. This reflective awareness strengthens insight, deepens understanding of human behavior, and prepares them to navigate future relationships with discernment and resilience. There is also a physiological and psychological benefit to this clarity. The stress of uncertainty, the mental gymnastics required to reconcile contradictory behavior, and the emotional turmoil caused by manipulation all tax the body. Cortisol levels rise, sleep is disrupted, and the nervous system remains in a heightened state of alert. By learning to see through the mask, the super empath reduces this chronic stress. They no longer expend energy decoding deception or defending themselves against phantom threats. Their nervous system can settle, their mind can rest, and their emotional center can stabilize. In this sense, awareness is not only protective, it is restorative. Another dimension to this clarity is empowerment. When a super empath sees through the mask, they reclaim the power that was once ceded. They no longer respond to the narcissist's attempts at provocation or seduction. They no longer invest emotional energy in trying to change or fix someone who is fundamentally incapable of change. They recognize that their responsibility lies not in altering the narcissist, but in protecting themselves. This recognition brings a profound sense of control. The empath is no longer subject to the whims of manipulation, because they understand the mechanisms at play and choose consciously whether to engage, and most often, they choose not to. This clarity also sharpens discernment in subtle ways. The super empath begins to notice patterns of behavior that others might overlook. They see the recurring cycles of idealization and devaluation, the strategic charm followed by cold withdrawal, and the carefully timed narratives designed to maintain influence. They understand the tactics, the intentions, and the outcomes. With this understanding comes confidence, and confidence becomes armor. The narcissist, who once relied on confusion and uncertainty, now encounters a presence that is steady, aware, and impenetrable. The usual leverage is gone. Seeing through the mask also allows the super empath to approach interactions with compassion without being manipulated. They recognize that the narcissist's behavior often stems from profound insecurity, unresolved trauma, and distorted coping mechanisms. This recognition does not excuse abuse, but it frames it in a context that prevents the empath from internalizing blame. They are able to acknowledge the pain that drives destructive behavior without surrendering to it or allowing it to dictate their own emotional state. This is one of the most remarkable powers of a super empath. They can be empathetic and discerning simultaneously. Ultimately, seeing through the mask transforms the relationship entirely. The narcissist loses the ability to provoke, confuse, or control. The empath no longer chases validation or approval. Emotional energy is reclaimed, boundaries are reinforced, and personal growth accelerates. The super empath navigates life from a place of truth and authenticity, guided by insight rather than manipulation, and supported by a nervous system that is finally free from the chronic stress of deception. It is important to note that this clarity is not a one-time event. It is a practice, cultivated over time through mindfulness, reflection, and repeated observation. The super empath continues to refine their perception, noticing subtleties, testing assumptions, and aligning their responses with reality rather than expectation. With each encounter, their insight deepens, their confidence grows, and their ability to remain unaffected by manipulation strengthens. When a super empath sees through the mask, they are no longer a participant in the narcissist's game. They become an observer, a presence that is steady and unyielding. The narcissist, who once controlled the narrative, now finds himself exposed, powerless, and ultimately frustrated. And this exposure, this clarity, is liberating for the empath. It is a form of psychological emancipation that allows them to live fully, freely, and authentically, unburdened by illusions, deceit, or manipulation. So remember, awareness is power. Seeing through the mask is not about suspicion or cynicism. It is about insight, clarity, and self-protection. It is about recognizing the truth of a person's character, understanding your own patterns, and reclaiming the emotional energy that was once surrendered. When you see through the mask, you are no longer a puppet. You are the keeper of your own mind, the guardian of your own heart, and the architect of your own life. Truth is the most powerful shield. Awareness is the most liberating weapon. And clarity, quiet, steadfast, unwavering clarity, is how the empath becomes untouchable. One of the most transformative moments in the journey of a super empath is discovering emotional independence. This is not merely about being self-reliant in the practical sense. Paying your bills, managing your schedule, or taking care of your own needs. Emotional independence goes far deeper. It is the realization that your inner state, your sense of stability, your happiness, your peace, cannot and should not depend on another person's behavior, approval, or affection. For empaths, especially those who have been entangled with narcissists, this is both liberating and revolutionary. The empath has been conditioned, often subtly, to invest themselves in the emotional world of another to the point where their own identity becomes intertwined with the other's odds, reactions, and demands. But the super empath learns that this attachment, this dependency, is the very leverage the narcissist exploits. Attachment is natural, but when it becomes a source of control, it is dangerous. The narcissist thrives when the empath's emotions are tethered to them. When they withdraw, manipulate, or act coldly, the empath feels panic, fear, or anxiety. When they flatter, charm, or promise, the empath experiences hope, relief, or fleeting joy. Each swing of the emotional pendulum reinforces the narcissist's power, because the empath's inner life has been placed in the hands of someone whose morality, empathy, and consistency are unreliable. Emotional independence breaks this cycle. It is the conscious decision to reclaim the inner world from someone who cannot be trusted with it. Developing emotional independence begins with self-awareness. The super empath starts to notice the patterns of their attachment. They recognize the automatic emotional responses, triggered by the narcissist, the instant tension when a text goes unanswered, the immediate disappointment when promises are broken, the rising panic when manipulations escalate. Awareness alone is powerful. It illuminates the machinery of attachment, revealing that much of the suffering was self-inflicted, not because the narcissist's actions were justified, but because the empath had surrendered emotional control. Once this machinery is seen, it can be dismantled. Next comes deliberate practice. Emotional independence is cultivated through mindfulness, reflection, and conscious choice. When a narcissist attempts to provoke a reaction, the super empath observes the feelings that arise without surrendering to them. They notice fear, anger, disappointment, or sadness, acknowledge these emotions, and then allow them to pass rather than acting upon them. The power of this practice cannot be overstated. Each moment of non-reactivity reinforces the empath's autonomy. Each pause between stimulus and response is a declaration: I am in charge of my own emotional life. Over time, these small acts accumulate, rewiring the nervous system and creating resilience. Another crucial element is detachment, which must not be confused with indifference. Detachment does not mean the empath stops caring or becomes emotionally numb. It means they no longer tether their inner peace to someone else's instability. They recognize that the narcissist's behavior is a reflection of the narcissist's limitations, not a reflection of their own worth. This distinction is profound. It allows the empath to feel compassion without being consumed, to maintain empathy without becoming vulnerable to exploitation, and to engage with life fully without surrendering emotional sovereignty. Emotional independence also transforms how the empath approaches relationships. Instead of seeking validation, approval, or affection from someone else, to feel complete, they cultivate an inner source of fulfillment. This may involve deep reflection, creative expression, connection with nature, meditation, or spiritual practice. The empath begins to experience joy, satisfaction, and meaning from their own presence, their own choices, and their own achievements. When the narcissist encounters someone who is not dependent, who does not need them for emotional validation, they are profoundly destabilized. The cycle of manipulation loses its efficacy because the empath's emotional state is no longer a tool to be used. The psychological and physiological benefits of emotional independence are equally significant. Chronic attachment to a manipulative partner keeps the nervous system in a state of hypervigilance, constantly anticipating the next disruption or approval. This produces stress hormones, disrupts sleep, and erodes mental clarity, By reclaiming emotional independence, the super empath reduces chronic stress, restores balance to the nervous system, and strengthens overall health. Emotional regulation and autonomy are not abstract concepts. They are essential for well-being. They allow the body and mind to heal from past trauma, and they fortify the empath against future attempts at manipulation. Emotional independence also teaches the empath self-trust. In the past, they may have doubted their perceptions, second-guessed their feelings, or sought external confirmation for every intuition. But with independence comes confidence. The empath learns that they are capable of navigating their emotional world without surrendering control to another. They trust their instincts, honor their boundaries, and make decisions rooted in integrity rather than fear of loss or desire for approval. This self-trust is deeply empowering and becomes a cornerstone of resilience in all areas of life. Interestingly, emotional independence can also transform the narcissist's experience, not because the empath seeks revenge, but because the narcissist encounters someone they cannot manipulate. They discover that the usual levers of control, guilt, fear, longing, or flattery, no longer operate. The empath's stability, calm, and autonomy unsettle the narcissist in a way that is subtle but profound. The very traits that made the narcissist feel powerful now leave them powerless. And yet this is not about domination. It is about the empath reclaiming what was always theirs. The freedom to experience life on their own terms, to define their own worth, and to regulate their own inner world. Emotional independence is also a form of forgiveness, not the kind that opens the door to renewed manipulation, but the kind that allows the empath to release attachment without resentment. By separating their emotional well-being from the narcissist's actions, they free themselves from cycles of anger, bitterness, and longing. They are able to process the past, integrate lessons, and move forward without carrying unnecessary emotional weight. This is liberation in its purest form. Ultimately, emotional independence is not a final destination, but a continuous practice. It is a commitment to honor oneself, to protect one's inner life, and to cultivate resilience in the face of emotional manipulation. It is the conscious decision to prioritize self-sovereignty over control by others. It is the declaration that peace, stability, and self-respect are not negotiable. So the next time you feel your emotions being drawn toward someone else's chaos, remember this: your inner life belongs to you. Your joy, your calm, your health, and your self-worth are yours to protect. Emotional independence is not a withdrawal from life, it is the reclamation of it. And in this reclamation lies the ultimate power, freedom, and liberation for the super empath. When you stand firmly in your own emotional autonomy, nothing outside of you can dictate your peace, nothing can manipulate your joy, and nothing can diminish the strength of your soul. One of the most transformative shifts for a super empath is realizing that the most profound form of resistance, the quietest yet most powerful act, is not confrontation or argument, but the cultivation of their own life, joy, and growth. Success and self-glow become, in a sense, the ultimate revenge, though it is a revenge that is not rooted in bitterness or malice. It is a revenge born from clarity, self-respect, and a refusal to allow someone else's dysfunction to dictate one's path. For too long, empaths who have been entangled with narcissists have invested their energy in responding, pleasing, managing, and surviving in a world designed to manipulate their compassion. But the super empath turns the lens inward and discovers the profound truth: flourishing in your own life, building your own world, and shining in your own right is the most disorienting and potent experience for someone who sought to control you. When a narcissist encounters a super empath thriving, they feel destabilized because their entire framework depends on the opposite. They are accustomed to the empath being reactive, uncertain, dependent, and pliable. Their influence is reinforced by seeing someone struggle, doubt themselves, or seek their validation. They expect emotional turbulence to remain accessible, predictable and exploitable. But when the empath chooses growth over reaction, creativity over conflict, and self-investment over manipulation, the narcissist's strategies crumble. The world the narcissist attempted to construct around control collapses in the presence of a person who is radiant, self-sufficient, and moving forward with intention. The super empath begins to understand that this is not about revenge in the traditional sense. It is not about seeking payback, humiliation, or retribution. Those acts, while satisfying in the short term, are reactive. They perpetuate the cycle of attachment and emotional surrender that has kept the empath vulnerable. Real empowerment is different. It is a quiet, unshakable joy in living authentically. It is thriving on your own terms. It is success, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, and often material, that is built from the foundation of integrity, boundaries, and self-care. This is the revenge that a narcissist cannot anticipate or dismantle because it does not engage them directly. It exists entirely within the empath's domain. Building this form of self-glow requires intentionality. It begins with the acknowledgement that your energy is sacred, that your time is finite, and that your life is yours to construct. Every hour spent in worry about the narcissist, every attempt to repair, explain, or gain approval, is an hour diverted from growth, kriya, shit, and fulfillment. The super empath shifts focus. They dedicate themselves to skills, passions, relationships, health, and projects that nourish and expand them. The narcissist becomes irrelevant, not through confrontation but through absence and the light of a life well lived. This transformation is not superficial. It is not about dressing well, achieving status, or seeking admiration as a form of validation. The glow the super empath cultivates is internal, a radiance born of self-mastery, self-respect, and emotional autonomy. It is the glow that comes from sleeping peacefully, knowing boundaries are honored. It is the glow of working on oneself, growing resilience, and learning to love life independently. It is the glow of creative expression, of pursuing goals for intrinsic fulfillment rather than approval. And the narcissist, who has lived off the reflection of others' insecurities, feels powerless in the face of someone who no longer offers that reflection. There is also a profound psychological benefit to this approach. Narcissists thrive on control, and their attempts to maintain influence generate stress, anxiety, and self-doubt in the empath. By investing energy in self-growth, the super empath removes themselves from the stress equation. They stop reacting to provocation, stop seeking validation, and stop chasing approval. The focus shifts to creating, thriving, and cultivating joy. As a result, the empath's nervous system heals, stress hormones decrease, and the body and mind experience a deep sense of restoration. Self-glow, in this sense, is not vanity. It is health, resilience, and liberation in action. Success and self-glow also serve as a mirror of possibility, not just for the empath, but for others around them. When people witness someone who has been entangled in manipulation rise above it, thrive, and embody their own power, it challenges them to reconsider their own boundaries, choices, and self-respect. The super empath, through their growth, becomes an unspoken teacher. They show that freedom, stability, and joy are achievable not by confronting others, but by mastering oneself. The narcissist experiences this as deeply destabilizing because it undermines their identity. Their sense of power is built on the perception that others are dependent, vulnerable, and accessible to manipulation. When the empath flourishes, the narcissist encounters a reality in which their strategies have no effect. No amount of charm, deceit, or aggression can penetrate someone who is fully invested in their own growth, fully anchored in their own boundaries, and fully in control of their inner life. The narcissist is confronted with a paradox. The more they seek to reclaim influence, the more irrelevant they become. The super empath's life itself becomes an unassailable fortress. Interestingly, cultivating self-glow also strengthens the empath's relationships with others. Freed from the cycle of manipulation, The empath is able to connect authentically with people who respect, honor, and reciprocate their energy. This creates a positive feedback loop. The more the empath thrives in alignment with their values, the more they attract nourishing interactions, and the more their glow amplifies. It is a ripple effect, a kind of momentum that builds organically and cannot be derailed by the narcissist's interference. It is important to note that this journey is gradual and requires patience. Many empaths, conditioned to self-sacrifice, may struggle at first to redirect their energy from trying to change or influence the narcissist to building their own life. Old habits of worry, overgiving, and seeking approval may persist. But with consistent practice focusing on self-growth, honoring boundaries, and celebrating small victories, the empath begins to experience the profound joy and power of their own life. Each achievement, each moment of self-care, each manifestation of independence compounds into a radiance that is tangible, undeniable, and disorienting to those who once sought to control them. In the end, the ultimate power of a super empath is subtle, yet extraordinary. By choosing to live fully, grow continuously, and shine independently, they communicate a truth that words cannot express. No one can take your life, your joy, or your essence without your consent. The narcissist may attempt manipulation, charm, or provocation, but these efforts fall flat against a foundation built on self-respect, autonomy, and flourishing. This is the true revenge, not a reactive or destructive act, but the enduring, luminous expression of a life reclaimed. Success and self-glow are not acts of spite. They're acts of liberation, health, and integrity. They are a declaration that the empath's energy is theirs to cultivate. Their joy is theirs to claim, and their life is theirs to shape. And in this radiant autonomy, the narcissist finally encounters what they cannot control, influence, or diminish: a super empath fully alive, fully sovereign, and unapologetically whole. The quiet power of flourishing is unstoppable. One of the most subtle yet profound ways a super empath gains power over a narcissist is by refusing to compete. For most people, competition is instinctive. We compare ourselves to others, measure our worth against theirs, and feel the pressure to prove ourselves in some arena, whether it's work, relationships, social status, or appearance. For a narcissist, this tendency is a gold mine. They thrive on comparison, on jealousy, on the need to provoke insecurity. They plant subtle seeds: a comment about your appearance, a boast about their achievements, a dismissive remark about your choices. They measure power by how much they can make you doubt, how much they can compel you to compete, how much they can keep you chasing their approval or validation. The super empath recognizes this pattern early. They notice the subtle nudges, the provocations disguised as compliments or critiques, the challenges embedded in casual conversation. And instead of rising to the bait, they make a conscious choice: I will not compete. This is not indifference, nor is it arrogance. It is a profound act of self-preservation and self-mastery. By refusing to engage in the narcissist's games, the empath removes the very leverage the narcissist relies upon. There is no response to manipulate, no energy to exploit, no insecurity to exploit. The narcissist is confronted with an impenetrable calm that refusing to play by their rules. Refusing to compete requires tremendous self-awareness. It demands that the empath recognize the emotional triggers that might compel a reaction: jealousy, shame, anger, fear, or the need for validation. These triggers are often deeply ingrained from past experiences, family conditioning, or prior relationships. The super empath must learn to observe these impulses without surrendering to them. When the narcissist makes a remark meant to provoke comparison, the empath notices the rush of emotion, acknowledges it, and then consciously decides not to react. This pause is a form of sovereignty, a declaration that one's inner life is not available for manipulation. This practice of non-competition is also deeply liberating. For years, empaths may have been caught in cycles of comparison, striving to measure up, to earn love, or to prove worthiness. They may have been driven by the narcissist's subtle cues, always trying to win approval or avoid criticism. But when the empath refuses to compete, they break free from these invisible chains. They no longer seek validation externally because they recognize that their value is intrinsic. Their self-worth is not dependent on the narcissist's approval, nor is it diminished by the narcissist's attempts to provoke. In this refusal, there is profound empowerment. There is also a health dimension to this choice. Chronic competition, especially against someone skilled in manipulation, triggers stress responses in the body. Elevated heart rate, increased cortisol, disrupted sleep, and constant nervous system activation. By stepping out of the game, the empath restores balance. Emotional energy that was once exhausted, improving, defending, or outperforming is redirected towards self-care, personal growth, and meaningful pursuits. Nervous system regulation improves, resilience strengthens, and overall health begins to flourish. The act of refusing to compete is not just psychological, it is physiological, grounding the empath in calm and stability. The super empath's refusal to compete also subtly shifts the power dynamics in the relationship. The narcissist expects reaction, engagement, and tension. When these are absent, the usual tools of control fail. They may escalate attempts to provoke, increasing the intensity of their comments or actions, but without emotional reactivity, these efforts lose efficacy. The empath remains steady, observing rather than reacting, refusing to enter the cycle of comparison and competition. This is disorienting for the narcissist. They are accustomed to a world in which others measure themselves against their narratives. But the super empath offers no such submission. The equilibrium has changed, and the narcissist is left destabilized by their inability to provoke or control. Refusing to compete also encourages the empath to cultivate a life that is internally motivated rather than externally validated. Instead of striving to outshine or match the narcissist, the empath invests energy in their own goals, passions, and purpose. Achievements are celebrated for their intrinsic value, not for the reaction they might provoke in someone else. Joy is derived from personal growth, creative expression, and meaningful connection, rather than from comparison or approval. In this way, non-competition is not a withdrawal from life. It is a redirection of energy toward what truly matters. There's also a profound psychological effect on self-esteem. By refusing to compete, the empath internalizes the understanding that they are complete, worthy, and capable as they are. They no longer define success through the lens of someone else's standards or expectations. This creates a self-reinforcing loop. As they cultivate independence and self-worth, their presence becomes increasingly unassailable. The narcissist may attempt to provoke insecurity, but the empath's foundation has been solidified. They have removed the narcissist's ability to dictate their sense of self. Importantly, refusing to compete does not equate to disengagement from life or ambition. The super empath continues to thrive, grow, and pursue goals. But the motivation comes from within. The narcissist may still attempt to provoke jealousy or insecurity, but these attempts are powerless because the empath is no longer tethered to external validation. This distinction is crucial. It is not about ignoring the world. It is about reclaiming control over how one responds to it. Over time, this practice transforms the empath's entire relational landscape. The narcissist loses influence, manipulations fail, and the empath cultivates a life that is self-directed, meaningful, and resilient. Emotional energy is preserved rather than squandered. Peace replaces anxiety, clarity replaces confusion, and the empath's presence becomes grounded and unwavering. In refusing to compete, the empath achieves a state of autonomy that the narcissist cannot penetrate, no matter how sophisticated their strategies. Ultimately, this refusal to compete is an expression of inner strength. It communicates a truth that words cannot. My value is intrinsic. My peace is non-negotiable. My life is mine to live, and no one can dictate my worth. It is a quiet, steadfast defiance that the narcissist cannot counter. The empath's refusal to enter the cycle of comparison and conflict is a form of mastery, a reclaiming of energy, and a foundation for lasting freedom. So the next time someone attempts to provoke comparison, competition, or insecurity, you remember this: you do not have to play the game. Your energy, your peace, and your worth are yours alone. By refusing to compete, you reclaim control, restore health, and embody the power of presence. And in that refusal lies one of the most profound forms of liberation a human being can experience. Mastery is calm. Strength is non-engagement. And freedom begins when you refuse to compete. One of the most profound tools in the Super Empath's arsenal is strategic detachment, the calm, intentional exit from a situation or relationship that no longer serves their health, growth, or integrity. This is not impulsive or reactive. It is not an emotional outburst or a dramatic confrontation designed to shock or punish. Strategic detachment is deliberate. It is rooted in clarity, self-respect, and a deep understanding of the dynamics at play. It is the choice to reclaim one's energy and autonomy, without feeding into the chaos or drama that a narcissist thrives on. For many empaths, the idea of leaving, especially someone who has held power over their emotions, is terrifying. There is guilt, fear, and sometimes a persistent hope that the other person will change, that the pattern will improve, or that reconciliation is possible. Narcissists exploit these fears, often creating a sense of dependency that feels almost inescapable. But the super empath learns a vital truth. The most powerful exit is not a flight of desperation, but a measured calm and strategic disengagement. It is not about punishment, nor is it about proving a point. It is about reclaiming the life and emotional sovereignty that have been compromised for far too long. Strategic detachment begins with awareness. The super empath recognizes the patterns of manipulation, gaslighting, and emotional exploitation. They identify the cycles that keep them engaged, the triggers that provoke reaction, and the moments in which their energy is being siphoned for the narcissist's gain. This clarity allows them to see the situation as it is, rather than as they wish it could be. It is a moment of truth, a recognition that the relationship or interaction cannot be rebalanced, that control cannot be negotiated, and that the empath's well-being must take priority. Once awareness is established, preparation becomes key. Strategic detachment is not chaotic. It is carefully planned. The super empath determines the boundaries for the exit, what they will say, what they will not engage with, and how they will maintain emotional and physical safety. They prepare themselves mentally, emotionally, and often logistically. This preparation is empowering because it shifts control from the narcissist to the empath. For the first time, the empath is not responding to provocation or manipulation, but acting intentionally from a place of autonomy. The actual act of detachment is characterized by calmness. There is no need for explosive confrontation, dramatic revelations, or public humiliation. These reactive behaviors play into the narcissist's desire for attention and control. Instead, the super empath exits quietly, with dignity, and with consistency. They disengage from emotional arguments, refuse to be baited into debate, and maintain clarity about their boundaries. This calmness is disorienting for the narcissist. They are accustomed to chaos, conflict, and drama, and when these are absent, their strategies fail. The empath's quiet, measured exit removes them from the narcissist's sphere of influence while preserving their own energy and composure. Strategic detachment also involves emotional regulation. The empath may feel anger, sadness, grief, or even fear as they prepare to disengage. These feelings are natural, but they are acknowledged internally without being allowed to dictate behavior. The empath practices self-soothing, reflection, and grounding techniques to maintain equilibrium. This is not suppression, it is conscious choice. It is the ability to hold space for emotions without being consumed by them. This internal mastery ensures that the exit is strategic rather than reactive, and that the empath retains integrity throughout the process. Another critical element is the recognition that detachment is not a betrayal of empathy or compassion. Many empaths fear that leaving someone who has caused harm is cruel or selfish. But the truth is that compassion without boundaries, without self-protection, becomes enmeshment and perpetuates suffering. Strategic detachment is an act of compassion for oneself, and, paradoxically, for the narcissist as well. It removes the narcissist from a dynamic where they can exploit or manipulate, while allowing the empath to reclaim space for healing, growth, and authenticity. Strategic detachment also forces prior lessons of the super empath, non-reaction, emotional independence, and refusal to compete. By stepping away deliberately, the empath removes themselves from the cycles of manipulation entirely. They no longer respond to provocation, no longer seek approval, and no longer invest energy in trying to change the narcissist. This act of self-preservation completes the arc of empowerment that begins with awareness and grows through boundary setting, emotional autonomy, and self-investment. Importantly, strategic detachment is not a one-time event. It can take multiple iterations, small disengagements, pauses, and periods of reflection before a full exit is possible. Each step is intentional, reinforcing the empath's autonomy and reducing the narcissist's leverage. Over time, this practice cultivates resilience, confidence, and clarity. The empath learns that disengagement is not abandonment of self or others, but a necessary tool for maintaining health and integrity in a world where manipulation and emotional exploitation exist. There is also a liberating psychological effect. Narcissists often instill doubt, confusion, and guilt to keep the empath tethered. By choosing strategic detachment, the empath restores clarity, reclaims self-trust, and experiences a profound sense of liberation. They see clearly that their value, dignity, and emotional well-being are not contingent upon the narcissist's behavior. This clarity creates a ripple effect, reinforcing other aspects of self-mastery, such as personal growth, emotional independence, and intentional living. Strategic detachment, in essence, is the embodiment of the super empath's inner power. It demonstrates that one can disengage without losing presence, that one can protect one's emotional landscape without resorting to aggression, and that true strength lies in calm, intentional action rather than reactionary force. It is an elegant, profound, and often disorienting response to a person who has relied on chaos for control. Ultimately, strategic detachment is a reclaiming of life. It is a conscious choice to prioritize well-being, restore health, and preserve dignity. It is a declaration that no one can dictate one's emotional state, that no one can manipulate one's sense of worth, and that one's inner life is sovereign. The calm exit does not just remove the empath from harm. It signals an unshakable truth. The empath is in control and no external force can undermine that control. So when the moment comes to step away, remember this: disengage with clarity, act with intention, and preserve your energy. Let the exit be calm, dignified, and strategic. In doing so, you are not abandoning your power. You are reclaiming it. And in that reclamation lies freedom, peace, and the ultimate affirmation that your life belongs solely to you. A calm exit is not weakness, it is mastery. The final piece in the journey of a super empath is the often misunderstood concept of forgiveness without reconciliation. For many people, forgiveness is synonymous with returning, reconnecting, or re-establishing a relationship. But true forgiveness, in the context of a relationship with a narcissist, has nothing to do with permission, access, or reconciliation. It is an internal process, a release of attachment to pain, anger, and resentment, carried out not for the narcissist's benefit, but for the empath's own liberation. It is the last step in reclaiming emotional sovereignty, a conscious choice to free oneself from the weight of past harm, and a declaration that one's inner life will no longer be defined by someone else's cruelty or manipulation. The challenge for many empaths is that forgiveness can feel like surrender, or worse, like excusing behavior that was harmful or abusive. There is a fear that releasing resentment equates to condoning what happened. But the super empath understands a crucial distinction. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. and it is not permission. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. It is a conscious act of releasing the emotional chains that bind you to the past. The narcissist's actions are not erased or justified, but they are no longer allowed to dictate the empath's present or future. Emotional state. Forgiveness without reconciliation begins with acknowledgement. The empath must fully recognize the harm that has been done, the manipulations endured, and the emotional, mental, or even physical toll of the relationship. This is not denial or minimization. It is a clear-eyed assessment of the facts, what was taken, what was lost, and what patterns were established. This acknowledgement is necessary because true forgiveness cannot occur without first facing reality. To forgive without this step would be superficial. It must be rooted in clarity and understanding, not in ignorance or avoidance. Once acknowledgement is established, the empath works to release the emotional grip of resentment. This is often the most challenging part. Emotions such as anger, grief, and frustration can feel justified, even righteous. The empath may replay scenarios in their mind, analyzing every word, action, and motive. But strategic forgiveness is about recognizing that holding on to this energy keeps the narcissist alive in your mind, and worse, keeps you tethered to a cycle of emotional reactivity. By consciously letting go, the empath refuses to give the narcissist continued access to their inner life. This is not weakness. It is mastery. It is the ultimate reclaiming of personal power. Forgiveness without reconciliation also involves cultivating self-compassion. Many empaths carry guilt or self-blame for past interactions, believing they could have done more, been stronger, or avoided the situation. The super empath reframes this narrative, understanding that they were doing the best they could with the awareness and tools they had at the time. Self-compassion reinforces the boundaries and emotional independence established earlier, reminding the empath that healing is not about judgment, but about restoration. It is a way to honor one's own resilience and capacity for growth. Another critical aspect is the recognition that forgiveness does not require verbal communication with the narcissist. One does not have to explain, justify, or inform the other person of the act of forgiveness. Forgiveness is internal. It is a mental and emotional release, a reclaiming of energy, and a realignment of focus toward personal well-being and growth. There is no need for the narcissist to understand, acknowledge, or accept it, because the process is entirely for the empath's liberation. In fact, any attempt to involve the narcissist in the process often undermines it because it risks re-entering the cycle of manipulation or control. Forgiveness without reconciliation also reframes the empath relationship to their own pasts. By releasing resentment, they reclaim the narrative of their life. They transform experiences of manipulation and pain into lessons and strength, rather than allowing those experiences to remain sources of ongoing suffering. The empath learns to view the past with clarity, not bitterness. Each memory, once weighted with emotional turbulence, becomes a stepping stone toward wisdom, resilience, and emotional sovereignty. This kind of forgiveness also strengthens boundaries. By choosing not to reconcile, the super empath maintains the protective structures that have been built throughout their journey: emotional independence, clarity of perception, refusal to compete, and strategic detachment. Forgiveness without reconciliation is not passive, it is active. It is active. It is an intentional reinforcement of all the tools the empath has developed to maintain peace and integrity. It communicates to oneself and to the world that healing is possible without returning to harm. Importantly, forgiveness without reconciliation cultivates a profound sense of inner peace. The empath no longer experiences the emotional whiplash of lingering anger or the subtle pull of attachment to someone who is never capable of authentic reciprocity. Peace is not derived from the narcissist's change, repentance, or acknowledgement. It is cultivated internally, anchored in self-respect, boundaries, and the recognition that emotional liberation is non-negotiable. This is transformative because it shifts the source of well-being entirely inward, freeing the empath from the fluctuations of external influence. There is also a powerful spiritual dimension to this practice. Forgiveness without reconciliation aligns with the empath's deeper sense of integrity and purpose. It acknowledges that life is not about controlling others, seeking revenge, or clinging to past wounds. Instead, it is about reclaiming wholeness, cultivating joy, and honoring one's own journey. By forgiving internally, the empath transcends the influence of the narcissist, not through conflict, but through the quiet strength of emotional sovereignty and clarity. Finally, strategic forgiveness allows the empath to move forward with freedom. Life is not paused by past trauma or manipulation. By releasing resentment and refusing reconciliation, the empath opens space for meaningful relationships, growth, and opportunities that are aligned with their values and emotional health. Energy once expended on anger, control, or reaction is redirected towards self-actualization. The empath becomes fully present in their own life, unburdened by the gravitational pull of the narcissist's past actions. Ultimately, forgiveness without reconciliation is the culmination of the super empath's journey. It integrates awareness, boundaries, emotional independence, strategic detachment, and self-glow into a practice that allows the empath to live fully, freely, and authentically. It is not about weakness, nor is it about submission. It is about mastery, the ability to release what does not. Serve, reclaim energy, and create a life defined not by external control, but by internal sovereignty. Forgiveness without reconciliation is not a gift for the one who caused harm. It is a reclamation of self, a liberation of the heart, and a declaration that your life belongs to you alone. It is the ultimate power of the super empath. To release, to heal, and to live unshackled by the past, grounded in freedom, clarity, and unwavering peace. Forgive to free yourself, not to reunite.